Hi everyone, my name is Chris. We're going to talk about sandboxing in Claude Code. So sandboxing will let you enforce what files and domains that Claude Code can access. So you can do this with a settings.json file, and there's some settings that I'm going to show you that help you control what exactly Claude can access so it doesn't do anything destructive like delete your prod database or change all your tests to pass while you're doing development. So this will really help you control what Claude can do. I'm also going to be introducing the Shelly Sandbox CLI for running Claude Code in a sandbox on Windows. You can run Claude Code in Sandbox if you're in a sandbox-enabled environment. So in Linux and Mac OS for Claude Code support that by default, but on Windows there's some extra steps you need to do. I did make a video about the Windows subsystem for Linux, so you can check that out. But this Shelly Sandbox will also help you if you're running on Windows and make that transition a little bit easier. So for settings in Claude Code, you can provide a settings.json file in a .claude folder, and that lets you customize the behavior. Within that settings.json file, you can enable sandboxing with a sandbox object. So what this will do is it'll let you control at what the bash tool, when used by Claude Code, what the bash tool can access. So for example, if you can have a file system and network object. In those objects, you'll have arrays that let you declare what is denied and what is allowed as far as file or domain access. Really helpful for controlling, making sure that you don't have secrets exposed maybe from in a secrets folder, or if you don't want to make a curl request to any domains to, for example, delete a database, you want to make sure that doesn't happen. You can sandbox it to make sure that it can't access any domains unless you specify that a domain can be accessed. Permissions from read, write, and edit tools can also get carried over into the sandbox boundary. So anything that you specify in permissions object, which I'll make a video on later, will have an impact on bash tool and what it can access. It gives you a little bit extra protection there. I also want to talk about calling Claude with -- settings. What this will let you do is add settings for that specific invocation of Claude, and you can provide either a settings.json file or some inline JSON to add those settings. Worth noting that you have to be mindful of how paths are being evaluated. I would always recommend using a file so that you can have those relative file paths in the settings made relative to that position in that file. So if you use inline JSON, any relative file paths are most likely going to evaluate to a temp directory. So for example, instead of giving restricting rights to project/tests, you're restricting rights to temp/tests instead, because that's where this / will evaluate to. So make sure you want to keep that in mind when if you're using this argument. Okay, so let's talk about the sandbox.filesystem object, which will control what files you can read or write to with the Claude Code bash tool. So you can allow and deny through 4 different arrays. They do exactly what they sound like they do: allow read, allow write, deny write, and deny read. You also will want to make sure any code that you want to run is also included in allow read. So for example, if you have node hello.js, you want hello.js to be visible to the bash tool, meaning it has to be in allow read. Now for the path format, for these files, you can use gitignore style paths, but they do have to be focused on path literals as opposed to allowing wildcards and things like that. There's also some path prefixes that will determine how paths are resolved. So you have absolute path, the path with respect to the home directory, and then you can either provide this / for the project root, to start from the project root, or provide a node directory, and it'll also start from the project root. With Mac OS, you do get to use some of these wildcard specifiers, but if you're running on Linux, or say you're doing Windows subsystem for Linux, you will not be able to use these specifiers. There is some things you can do around this. For example, you can set up hooks if you want to do something similar to implement these wildcard specifiers, and you're not on Mac OS. As far as precedence within a file system object, allow read is going to take precedence over deny read. So you can see here, we deny everything in the home directory, but then we re-allow with allow read to allow reads of my project /prd.md and then anything in this other folder within the project. Deny write is going to take precedence over an allow write. So here you can see we have progress.md allow write. So that lets us actually make writes over to that progress file. But if you had another deny write over it, then Claude Code would not be able to write to it with the bash tool. Also worth noting that allow write can overwrite a deny read here. So notice how we didn't have to say that we have allow read here. The allow write is actually going to result in an implied allow read for this progress.md file, right? Because you need read and write access to do writes. And again, default behavior for Claude Code is to have read access anywhere in the file system and write access anywhere in the project. If you want to control that, that's exactly why you need a sandbox. So you can use the sandbox file system object for that. With the sandbox.network object now, very similar to the file system object where you have some arrays that specify what's allowed and denied. You'll have the allowed domains array and the denied domains array. There's an extra detail where you can use wildcard specifiers to specify subdomains. So say if we wanted to access cli.github.com, you can have a star.github.com as the wildcard to access that. Worth noting that when you have this wildcard, it doesn't actually cover the Apex domain. So that's why you would need, say, a github.com itself if you want to go straight to github.com. Also note that the granularity is at the domain and subdomain level, so you can't specify a path like github.com/manual. So you got to keep that in mind when you're setting what domains are allowed and what domains are denied. So the precedence in our action is that denied domains will take precedence over allowed domains. So make sure if you want it to be able to access that you have it only in the allowed domains. Now, and it's gonna depend on how the pattern matches based on what domain you're going to. Also worth noting that your default behavior is that a domain is denied. If you're running interactively, it'll trigger an ask prompt. It'll ask you if you are going to say if you're fine with that web request or that curl request or whatever network access it needs through the bash tool to access that domain. Lastly, I want to tell you about the Shelly Sandbox CLI. So this is a tool you can use to really quickly set up and run Claude Code in a dev container. So this will let you do everything we talked about with sandboxing, and it's really, really helpful for those on Windows that are not really wanting to worry about the headache of setting up WSL2 and Linux containers, all of that, but still want to get those protections, prevent things like a prod database from being deleted or test files being manipulated, anything like that. You can provide an allow list.json, or you can manually provide your own settings.json for Claude and then run Claude within that sandbox, keeping it constricted to those specific things that you allow and keeping it within hard guardrails and restrictions on what it can do. So this will help you get better outputs, get more reliable operation of Claude Code. You can try it out now at sandboxing.shellyassist.com. I have the link in the description as well. Thank you for watching.